Hello everyone, and in today's video we're going to be talking about how to ask your teacher or professor for an extension for a big project, test, final paper, whatever it is you need an extension for. We're going to cover how best to ask for one and exactly what not to do when you're asking for an extension. So be sure to stay tuned to the very end for all my best tips. If you're thinking you need an extension for an assignment, paper, test, there are two things you need to do first. Number one, check the syllabus for the class policies. If there are policies specific to extensions, you want to be sure you follow them as much as possible. There may be school-wide policies or university-wide policies as well for extensions, and you want to be sure you check up on those too. If a policy already exists for how to go about requesting an extension, you want to try to follow that as much as possible when you're getting your extension. The second thing I want you to do is ask soon as you know you're going to need an extension. This means as far ahead in advance of that final deadline as possible. I used to have a policy for my AP classes where any student would be granted an extension as long as they asked before the due date. A lot of teachers will abide by similar policies. If there is neither a policy nor is it possible for you to ask in advance for your extension, your chances may be lower for actually getting your extension. Now, it still does not hurt to ask, so make sure you watch the rest of this video to learn all the rest of my best tips for approaching how to ask a teacher or professor for an extension on an assignment. So now that you're aware of how much time there is left and if there's any policies in place, you want to contact the professor or teacher as soon as possible. When you're reaching out to them, you want to make sure you provide them with a few pieces of information. You don't need to overshare here, but it's always helpful for that teacher to know what you've already done in terms of preparations for the assignment and how much work you have left to do. The next thing you want to tell them is the truth about why you need that extension. If you've had COVID and you're recovering from illness, obviously that is a legitimate excuse. If you've had a family emergency or you're just struggling with the material, you want to be honest about that as well. You want to be professional when you explain this. You don't need to provide every single detail and write 3 paragraphs on what your family situation is or how your symptoms progressed. That is just too much. Remember, you want to sound professional, not pitiful when you're asking for your extension. But as long as you provide the teacher or professor with some background information as to why you need the extension, they're in a better place to understand your situation and how they can best help you. Next up, a lot of students are worried about the format and the way in which they ask for an extension. And in most cases, when you're going to a professor with an issue or a problem, I would suggest doing this in person. However, asking for an extension, you might be better served asking over email just so you have some written documentation about the exchange between you and the teacher. And if they forget about offering you the extension, you can always refer back to that email later on down the road. It's also helpful for the professor so that they can remember the deadlines that you talked about, especially if you negotiate a deadline later in the future. Remember, teachers and professors are juggling a lot of students, sometimes hundreds, at the same time, and remembering every detail of every exchange of every student can be kind of challenging. So providing them with that information in writing is super helpful. The next thing you want to do is propose a new deadline. This is really important. This shows professionalism and takes some of the work off of the professor or teacher. By proposing a new deadline, you're estimating how much work you have left to get done, and you're showing that you're going to hold yourself accountable to that next scheduled deadline. Now, if you're in high school, you may want to loop in your advisor or mentor or any specific counselor that you have a relationship with that might be able to support you as you're trying to reach your academic goals. It's helpful to loop these people in because they can be an advocate for you in the process of requesting an extension, and they'll have that information that you provided the teacher with so that they can help you reach your new deadline once the extension has been approved. You do want to make sure that you are the person asking for the extension though. You definitely don't want a parent to do this or another teacher to ask on your behalf. By asking yourself, you're owning up to the fact that you need an extension, and you're showing responsibility for taking action and getting the assignment complete on your own. By getting somebody else to do that for you, you're not demonstrating to your professor or teacher that you'll be able to actually get the assignment done in the time necessary. After you've asked your teacher or professor for an extension, maybe a little bit of wait time for their final decision. In the meantime, while you're waiting to hear, work as if you do not have the extension yet and continue putting all of your best efforts towards the assignment or studying for the test or producing that paper. As soon as you hear back whether or not they've approved your extension, then you can readjust your pace for the new deadline. So let's say you've followed all of my guidelines. You've asked as early as possible for your extension, provided reasons, written professionally, you've proposed a new deadline, and you've looped in any supporting people who could help you with this process. But they still don't grant you that extension. Or they grant you an extension with points deducted or some sort of late penalty. Now this can happen. You may have to take a rough hit on your grade, but it is important to not give up on the assignment entirely. There are still some things you can do to make sure you do your best on that assignment that you needed an extension for but you didn't get. There's a lot of situations where teachers or professors can't offer any more extensions. The gradebook could be closed at the end of the year. It could be a final exam that's out of their hands, that they are not administering themselves, like AP exams or a larger test run through a university. Or it could be a test that they just cannot make another version of and they need you to take on that day. Whatever their reasons, you need to work as hard as you can to meet the original deadline now that you know you won't have an extension. If the assignment is already late, turn it in as soon as possible, possibly for late credit. If you haven't reached the actual deadline yet, work as hard as you can to get whatever work you can together and turn it in by the deadline. It may not be complete, it may not be your best efforts, but that's okay. You've already talked to the professor or teacher saying that you need an extension, they didn't grant it, and now they know that this piece of work that you're submitting now may not be the level at which you hoped you would perform. Don't be discouraged. Remember, this is just one assignment in a chain of lots of others that you'll face in your academic career. If you need extensions for multiple assignments in multiple classes, you definitely want to go back and make sure you reach out to the school, a counselor, an advisor, a mentor for some support, because more than likely, if you need lots of extensions, you might need support in other areas as well, and that is okay. Remember, it's okay to ask for help, and it is okay to ask for extensions. And if you don't get an extension, remember that you tried your best. It never hurts to ask. Let me know if you have any other questions about asking for extensions from teachers or professors. Put your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching. Give this video a like if it's been helpful, and I'll see you later.